item or second item on the agenda is introductions. Are there any introductions? Seeing none, we do not have a quorum, as I said earlier, so we're just going to focus on the non-action items. So we'll skip item 3, moving on to item 4, public comment period. Any members of the public that wish to speak? Seeing none, we'll go on to, there weren't any submitted public comments? Okay, item number 6, comments and updates from state and federal agencies. VDOT.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair. I do have a couple updates this morning. First, on some training items that are coming up. We have a training session for change orders and claims coming up on April 23rd at the VDOT Hampton Roads District Office in Suffolk. So more details will come out on that. So anybody interested, we'll have that. And also our 2024 Lap Circle Workshop is going to be held on June 12th this year. And that'll be in Virginia Beach. So we'll be sending out some additional details on that here shortly as well. I did want to put a placeholder. I think I mentioned in previous meeting that our 6-year plan spring public hearing is going to be planned for April this year. We don't have an exact date yet, but as soon as I have that, I'll be sure to get that out to you all. And of course, similar to what we did last year, the public hearing will be held in the VDOT district office in Suffolk. And then the final update I had, just a reminder for the Smart Scale Round 6 program. Hopefully you all are aware now that the pre-application Smart Portal has opened for the pre-application. It opened on March 1st and closes on April 1st. So please be sure to get in your applications. If you don't submit a pre-application, you will not be able to submit a final application for consideration for funding. So please be sure to hit that date. Also, you should be aware by now, but we have different readiness gates that were established for this round of Smart Scale. The first readiness gate is a certification that an applicant must make, just acknowledging that you've been in contact with your VDOT point of contact on your application, so they're aware of it, and that any supporting documentation for the project will be completed and uploaded in a portal by July 15th. So we're calling that Readiness Gate 1. So that's due at the same time as your pre-application is due by April 1st. So for the final applications, the full applications the portal will open back up on June 1st and close on August 1st. So please be sure to have that date in your schedule. Also, I mentioned the readiness gates. So we have a couple more readiness gates, Readiness Gate 2 and 3. So on July 15th, for these new readiness gates, you need to submit all of your supporting documentation to support your application. So we put together a 2-page document that I'll make sure to get to Kathleen to include in your meeting minutes that kind of outline the important dates and what's required for each of these gates. So I just wanted to make you aware of some key dates. So again, the portal closes on August 1st, but your supporting documentation is needed by July 15th to be uploaded to the portal. I will also just point out too that for any letters of support that you need from the TPO, try to get those completed by July 15th as well and uploaded. So please make sure you have that, to your TPO contact prior to the deadline. Madam Chair, that's all the updates I have right now.
Okay, thank you. I also attended the Smart Scale training on the website. I think it was recorded too, so video is available on the Smart Scale portal website.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you for mentioning that. Yes, there was some training last week on Smart Scale. It was recorded. We'll make sure to include that in the meeting minutes as well. I'll do that to Kathleen.
I see there's no DRPT, FHWA. Report.
Good morning. No report this morning.
Thank you. And no military. Okay, so we'll skip item number 7. We do not have. Skip item 7 and 8 and go on to traffic's update. Amy Jordan.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. I am Amy Jordan. I serve a couple of different roles. I am the Director of Communications and Business Development for Hampton Roads Transit. I'm also the Executive Director for our Traffic's Commuter Options Program for the region. So I'm excited to be here this morning to talk to you about Traffic's and just give you an update. This is our annual report, and I do have copies of it that are in the hallway for anybody that would like one. We can also send you one digitally if you would prefer that as well. Next slide. So this is our current mission, and I'm going to let you know that we actually are getting ready to go through rebranding. We're excited to be kicking this off very shortly. We're actually kicking off our CAP strategic plan today after our traffic subcommittee meeting. So this is our current mission, but we will be revising this. But this is what you'll find in your annual report. But basically, the goal for traffics that are unfamiliar with the program is to connect commuters with choices for transportation. And I say choices because often we call it alternative. I don't want people to think of it as alternative. I want them to think of it as I can carpool, I can van pool, I can take a bus, I can walk, I can ride a bike, and find ways basically to get out of their single occupancy vehicle, reduce emissions, and improve congestion in our region. Next slide. So we have different goals, and I mentioned a few of them before. So these are some of the services that we have. We actually manage the employee-based marketing for the Go Pass 365. That is actually an HRT ticket, but it's something that was born out of Traffic's is managed in Traffic's, and it works with employers to be able to provide year-round annual passes. We work with different groups. Sometimes they're business consortiums like DNC. Sometimes it is, employment based. Sometimes it's colleges and universities. Newport News Ship is obviously our biggest customer of that program. So it's something that we are very proud that we offer. Obviously, biking, walking is very important. We're getting ready to kick off a new bike program we're going to talk about later today in our traffic subcommittee meeting. Getting people to park and rides. A lot of times people think about van pool, carpool, and they think, oh, but I got to go pick somebody up. And you don't have to. You can meet somebody at a park and ride. There's plenty of free park and rides within our region, and then be able to get to where you need to go from there. Providing transit information. Van pool services, it's a very big one for us. We actually have a van pool grant through DRTP that we manage to be able to provide incentives to get people into van pools. And providing surveys to employers. We will actually come out and help survey your employees to figure out their commuting habits and create a better commuting plan for them. So next slide. So keeping pace with success, this is just a few of the things that we had results for the last year. We did meet with 35 new employers, and we actually are working with 756 total employers this past year. So we're very excited about how much we have grown with that. So if there are employers in your community that you think can benefit from this program, please connect us with them. We'd love to come out and work with them. We've attended 159 commuter events, initiated 208 program meetings, and we received requests in our, most of them are through our app, for 2,430 commuter information requests that we help fulfill. Again, a few more successes that we had. We added 942 new commuter members. So what that is we do have an app. It's run through the state DRPT. It's called Connecting VA. Some of y'all might have had the Traffic's app before, but now it's gone statewide. Same app, but now, same app manager, I should say. It looks the same interface, but it is now statewide. So that's great because sometimes in our region, we have commuters that might be coming to Richmond, but they're going down to James City County, or they're coming from other areas and going out. So this way they can actually log their trips, and it works wherever you are in the state. That the second number, almost 15,000 registered commuters in our app. So it's a very significant number for the state of Virginia for all of the TDM programs. And total reduced vehicle miles traveled of those participating in our programs, close to 5 million. So it really makes a significant difference to get people out of those single occupancy vehicles. Next slide. And that saves close to 3 million in commuting related expenses. So again, very important as we're starting to roll out tolls across the region. It's another way that commuters can save by being able to take advantage of the HOV opportunities if they're carpooling, van pooling, or taking transit. Um, Ride matching success. So within our app, 75% ride matching success. You can actually go in there to help find a ride share carpool within the app. So we're very excited to see those connections being made. We currently actually, says 28 registered van pools. So that was last year for our FY23 goals. We have a new one, so we're now to 29. And that's 223 different participants in those van pools. So we're continuing to work to grow that number. Then, of course, revenue from the Go Pass was close to $500,000. And just a little bit of the breakdown of how our funding works. So our funding actually comes through DRPT to the TPO, but the program is managed by HRT. Uh, but it's region wide, and when I say region wide, you think of HRT, you think of the 6 communities they serve. We also serve the WADA area, we serve the Suffolk Transit area, we serve areas that are not served or underserved by transit. So anything that is served by the TPO is served by us. So a little bit of just, again, how you can see our breakdown. But a lot of it is in marketing. It is really getting that information out to the community about these programs and resources that they can take advantage of. Next slide. And so just a little bit about last year's marketing. You can see some of the creative campaign that we have here. It's, again, getting people to think about, the theme last year was commuting differently. How can you get out of that vehicle and think about another way that you're getting around? So we tried to have visuals that were vibrant, friendly, modern, and optimistic to people. Next slide. And again, just shows you a little bit more of some of those visuals that we had this past year. And we do those through social media. Sometimes you might see our billboards, even and digital billboards we've been doing recently. When you're sitting in traffic, it's a great way to remind people of how to get out of traffic. Oh, and we've even done some TV commercials recently and radio spots. Next slide. So the road ahead. So these were the goals that we had set for this year for FY24, and we're very excited how far along that we have come with those goals. Uh, Obviously, educating businesses, government officials, others about the program. Again, this is an employer-based program, so we really need, businesses, economic developers, others to think about how this can benefit commuters in the region getting to their workplace. Uh, Developing a comprehensive regional park and ride strategy. So we've been looking at that and how do our park and rides connect and how people are using them. Developing a regional community biking strategy. And so we've worked with the TPO. TPO, of course, has the region's biking strategy, but how do we fit into that? How do we support that effort and get more people to think about taking their bike to work? And I got to tell you, before I was with this program, I didn't think about those things. But since then, I work in our Norfolk office, but I live a mile from the Hampton HRT office. And the days that I've been there, I've been able to ride a bike and walk, and because I'm about a mile away. And I would have never thought of doing something like that before. And then, not yesterday, but last fall when it was election day, one of the coworkers said something about make sure you take transit to get there. Well, I cross over a transit line to get to my pole, but I was like, I can ride my bike to the pole, and I've never done that before. So again, thinking differently about how you can actually, get out of that vehicle. So we are working on that, and then targeting new customers to increase that van pool, carpool participation. We've had some very exciting campaigns this year around that. And then developing the commuter assistance program strategic plan that I mentioned that we are kicking off today, and our comprehensive branding strategy for our rebrand. This program has been called Traffics, I think, since it was created in the 90s. And when you hear it, you think of traffic. So even though it's kind of punny to have the fix on the end, it doesn't always resonate, and we want people to have a positive experience with it. And sometimes people are confused; they think maybe it's a VDOT program or something else, so they don't realize that we are actually there for them and helping to with their commute. Next slide. And then the way that we will measure those goals. So this is, again, what my team is working on, attracting and educating 120 new organizations, maintaining engagement with others that we have, and again, meeting those commuter events, program meetings, stakeholder engagements. I'll tell you, they are everywhere. Our outreach team, they will go and table an event if there's like a employee resource day. They will do in-docs every month at the Naval Shipyard. They are wherever you have new employee orientations. Again, talking about these programs with employees and those opportunities. So always looking for those engagement opportunities. And then again, campaigns, getting people to think about we have Earth Day. That's our next big one coming up, which I just call Earth Month because we'll have a lot of things we're celebrating then throughout the month. And then Bike Month is a really big one for us. Discover Transit, Rideshare Month, again, just some of the different things that we get people to think about. Next slide. That's it. So I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has, and I appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you, Amy. Anybody have any questions? Thank you for the report and all the work you do.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so the next item, we'll have to skip 10, 11, 12. No, yeah, and so 13, we can do the Hampton Roads Regional Safety Study Update Draft Report from Keith. Oh.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. Today, I'm excited to make a presentation on our draft version of our Hampton Roads Regional Safety Study Draft Report. Roadway safety has always been a priority here at the HRTPO through our regional transportation planning process. We do it in various ways, but one of the ways we do it is through our Hampton Roads Regional Safety Study. This is the third update to the study. We do it about every decade and have released updates in 2004 and 2014. But new this time is the SS4A program, the Safe Streets and Roads for All federal discretionary grant program. So as part of our safety study this time, we wanted to make sure that our new plan would comply with all the standards included in the new SS4A program. I think probably most people in this room are familiar with SS4A, so I don't want to go too deep into details on that. But it is a new program that was created by the IIJA, which provides about $5 billion for discretionary grants for safety plans and projects over 5 years. So any city, any county, the MPO, we're all eligible to apply for these grants. The states actually are not, so that's a little unusual for these federal grant programs, but most people in the room here can apply for those grants. So we wanted to make sure that this safety study that we prepared would be compliant with the SS4A so that anybody in this room could apply for those grants using this as a safety action plan. So as part of the SS4A, they want to make sure their safety action plans include certain components. So I'm showing them though on there. I'm not going to go too deep in details on it, but we did want to make sure that our regional safety study did include these various factors, such as leadership commitments from our board, the planning structure, which includes our working group, which I'll go over on the next slide, various inputs, such as a safety analysis, making sure we consider equity as part of our study, and then also following up with various outcomes that you can see here on the slide. I did mention that we created a working group for the study. So first and foremost, I want to thank everybody who was willing to volunteer on the Regional Safety Study Working Group. I think we had about 5 meetings throughout the process to get your feedback, to provide you with information that we have, and also help us review the final products as they've gone through our approval process here. So definitely thank you for taking part in this group. So these are the various sections that are included in the regional safety study. Today, I'll go over the first 5 sections that are listed there, And then Sam and Teresa will be here in April, and they'll present the second half of the study to the TTAC. At the start of the study, we wanted to come up with a vision, mission, and goal for the study. So we got together with a working group to try to come up with each of these. And they did approve at the start of the process the vision, mission, and goal that you see here on the screen. I do want to mention the vision and mission closely parallel the statewide vision and mission that were included in the Strategic Highway Safety Plan. So we did not deviate too far from that when we prepared that for the safety study. Now, the goal at the bottom, which is to reduce fatalities and serious injuries to zero by the year 2050, which is the horizon year for the LRTP, that is based on our regional performance measures that we approve each year. The group that prepares those has wanted that to be our goal constantly as we've updated those every year. So we thought that that would be a good goal also to include with the regional safety study as we move forward. The next section we included looked at regional safety trends, kind of at a 30,000 foot level in terms of what's going on in our region. I just want to briefly go over crashes, the number of crashes, injuries, and fatalities in our region. Number of crashes is the light purple line at the top, and injuries is the dark purple. And then unfortunately, the red line is fatalities and what's going on with that in our region. So the number of crashes and number of injuries has actually been pretty constant over the last decade, some highs and some lows. Fortunately, 2022, the most recent data we have, did see a decrease in crashes and injuries. When you look at fatalities, however, it's been largely increasing through the years. We did reach a high of 179 fatalities in our region in 2021, which is much higher than the roughly 120 to 140 that we saw earlier in the decade. I do want to mention that we do have preliminary data for 2023 in terms of number of fatalities, and unfortunately that number is around 166 fatalities. So we did see even an increase from the high levels we saw in 2022. So unfortunately, bad news that safety continues to be an issue in our region, particularly when it comes to fatalities. Next section we looked at was crash characteristics. So we started breaking down the data, looking at what might be some of the causes or characteristics of crashes in our region. Today, I just wanted to go over four of the biggest factors that are going into fatal crashes in our region. First one I have up here is distracted driving. If you look at crashes, injuries, or fatalities, it's roughly about the same number. So about 1 out of every 5 to 1 out of every 6 crashes in our region involves distracted drivers. So we know this is generally a measure that is underreported, particularly when it comes to crashes and injuries. So it's probably higher than what you see here. But when it comes to fatal crashes, the data says about 1 out of every 6 fatalities, fatal crashes in our region involves a distracted driver. When you look at drinking, it's an even bigger factor. About 36% of the fatal crashes in our region involve at least one driver who had been drinking prior to the crash. So that is definitely one of the big factors. Even bigger is speeding. When you look at fatal crashes, 44% of the fatal crashes in our region involve somebody who had been speeding prior to the crash. In some of our analysis, we've seen these numbers have been increasing here, particularly since the pandemic started. So this is becoming an even bigger factor in our region in terms of fatal crashes. And then an even bigger one is safety belt use. So more than half of all fatal crashes, in our region involves at least one person who was killed in the crash who was not wearing a safety belt. So when you take all four of those big factors and kind of look at them all together, about 70% of the fatal crashes in our region, or fatalities in our region, involve at least one of these four factors. Some of them involve multiple. There's even 8 in our region that involved all 4. So these are definitely the biggest factors, particularly when you're looking at fatalities in our region. The last thing I wanted to go over today was our crash location analysis. So we took all the raw data for the years 2017 to 2021 and looked at all those crashes in our region, and then ended up analyzing the entire freeway system in Hampton Roads. And then we looked at over 1,000 intersections throughout the region. There were 5 measures we looked at. That's the number of crashes, the crash rate per amount of travel, whether it's VMT on a freeway segment or number of vehicles entering an intersection, if we looked at the intersections. We also looked at serious crashes, so the number of fatal and serious injury crashes at these locations, and then also the rate of fatal and serious injury crashes. The last thing we looked at is a VDOT measure that's called potential for safety improvement. So that would be based on characteristics of the location, how many crashes are occurring there versus how many we would predict to occur based on those characteristics. And so if there's a big difference where you're having a lot more crashes occurring than you would predict based on on volumes and roadway design. It has a high PSI, and those we also looked at as part of the study. We did create individual maps and tables for each locality. So if you look at the appendix of the study, we do have all that information broken down on a locality basis, or broken down on a location basis, I'm sorry, within each locality. So I do want to briefly go over some of the analysis we saw in crash locations. So this first map is showing crash rates on the peninsula for the 5-year period. Not really surprised, the highest crash rates we're seeing are around the HRBT and down in that corridor. Also a little bit along I-64. That was really where the work zone was occurring if you look at the 2017 to 2021 period. So no surprise it'd be a little higher there, but like I said, nothing too surprising that we saw on the peninsula. When you look at the south side, it's really hot spots, whether it's our tunnels, downtown tunnel in particular also was particularly high. Also the 264 interchange, you can see some of the legs approaching that interchange were some of the highest crash rates in our region. And then we broke it down and listed it by each individual segment to see which were the highest in our region. I-64 eastbound between Northampton and 264 had the highest crash rate in our region. When we looked at 2014 in our previous study, it also had the highest crash rate in our region. So this is clearly a hot spot, even more than our bridges and tunnels. That approach to the 264 interchange seems to always rank highest in terms of the data when we look at it. Also looking at crash locations, I'm just going to give an example here for number of crashes on the peninsula followed by the south side. So any of the locations, any of the intersections you see in dark maroon, I guess we'll call it, they had at least 20 crashes per year or more over the 5-year period of 2017 to 2021. So any location that had 100 plus crashes over that time. When you look on the peninsula, it's really concentrated on 2 corridors, Mercury Boulevard and Jefferson Avenue. Those locations definitely jumped out as the highest in terms of number of crashes. On the south side, there's not quite the same concentration. We did see isolated locations, particularly in Virginia Beach, that seemed to rank higher when we looked at the number of crashes than other locations on the south side. So same thing with freeways. We looked at intersections and looked at the ones that had the highest number of crashes, crash rate, fatal and serious injuries, so on and so on. So I'm just showing 2 examples here of the intersections with the highest number of crashes, and then also the intersections with the highest crash rates. If you look at number of crashes, as I said, it seems like a lot of them seem to be the Mercury Boulevard corridor, the Jefferson Avenue corridor, and then a few isolated locations in Virginia Beach, whether it's Indian River and Kempsville, Rosemont and Holland. Those seem to be the locations with the highest number of crashes. When we look at the crash rate, it's much more varied. We would see some urban locations, we would see some rural locations. So there wasn't quite the same patterns that we see when you look at terms of number of crashes. I think the highest one at the top is Roanoke and 48th in Newport News. So not one that you would jump out at you in terms of having the highest crash rate. Last thing I want to mention when it comes to crash locations, we did share this information with all the members of the working group and then with all the localities, even if you weren't part of the working group. So we broke down all the data that we analyzed as part of the study for each locality. This is an example that we sent to Williamsburg. So you have all that total crash, crash rate, serious crashes, and PSI information. Like I said, that was all sent to the localities. And we asked, at that point of the study, we asked for help in terms of the next step where we want to look at certain high crash locations and analyze ones in detail in each locality. So that's where I'll leave it for today, and we'll pick up with that in part 2 at the April TTAC meeting. But I just wanted to mention before I wrap up next steps, the draft report was included with today's agenda. So that the main report along with the appendices should have been included with the agenda. So if you want to look at information for your particular locality, you should be able to click the link in the agenda and get all that information. We started the extended 45-day public review period yesterday, so it will be open for public review and comment, I believe, until April 19th, I think. I think that's 45 days. So as I mentioned, we will be back to present part 2 at the April TTAC meeting, and then we will be coming back at the May TTAC and TPO board meetings, hopefully getting approval of the final report. I do want to mention a happy coincidence or funny coincidence. The TPO board meeting in May is on the exact same day that the SS4A grants are due for the 3rd round. So there's about 6 hours in between when the board should approve it and when the final deadline is. So don't know how we timed it that way exactly, but there should be, knock on wood, a final approved report just in time for the SS4A submittal. So with that, I'll be happy to take any questions you might have on the safety study.
you, Keith. Does anybody have any questions?
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, and it's come to my attention that item number 11 needs to go to the board. So we can't take action on it because we don't have a quorum, but John's going to present it just for everybody's information because it will be presented.
Thank you.
So John is going to present on transportation alternative set aside project selection and allocation.
Thank you. We'll give Keith a minute to catch up here. Threw a curveball at him. As Carol mentioned, this item has to go to the TPO board this month. And the reason for that is that in April, the CTB at-large members and the secretary have to make their allocations for TA set-aside projects. So this has to be wrapped up, and unfortunately, we can't take an action on it today. But at least I wanted to be transparent and let you know where we stand on this. In 2015, the FAST Act created the and also continued under IIJA, create a set aside. I don't know why this is doing that. I don't know what happened there. I didn't touch it, I swear. Create a Surface Transportation Block Grant Program for the TA set aside. Some refer to it as TAP still, but officially it's TA set aside. This year, the process is for 2 years of funding for fiscal year 25 and 26. And next time you can submit a TA set aside application will be October of 2025. Yep. So some of the eligible project categories I have listed here, I'm not going to go through each and every one of them, but we tend to get a lot of trail projects for the TA set aside. Seems to be the favorite vehicle for those kind of projects, but just wanted to illustrate some of the other types of projects that are eligible for TA set aside funding, including converting abandoned railways into trails, community improvement activities, environmental mitigation activities, and also boulevards and other roadways, largely in right-of-way former divided highways. We also get quite a few applications for the Safe Routes to School program, including we have 2 on this round for administrative positions as well. All right, here's how much money we have. This is a huge change from what we've had in previous rounds. So the HRTPO for fiscal years 25 and 26, we have $13.6 million to allocate. Our Hampton Roads District CTB member has $4.1 million to allocate. So total allocations available, or total dollars available for allocation, $17.7 million. Our Hampton Roads District CTB member, he can allocate money for the HRTPO area, but also it's the entire Hampton Roads construction district. And then when I get to the chart to kind of go over all the ins and outs of that, you'll understand why. But there are areas outside the HRTPO area that can be funded as well, as long as it's in a construction district. In addition to the funding you see at the top here, the CTB at-large members and the secretary, that's what I mentioned, they'll be meeting in April. They'll see what's been allocated by the MPOs and by the district CTB members. And as they've done in the past, they'll allocate monies to projects that may have received some partial funding and complete the funding on that, or entirely fund a new project. So the last round of TA set aside, just over $5.7 million was allocated. So you see a huge leap because of IIJA there. The process itself, it starts with the VDOT Local Assistance Division. They coordinate applications, they score the proposed projects. Then HRTPO staff, we coordinate with our CTP member, which we've already done, and on their selections and allocations. And then our HRTPO board will approve a set of allocations for TA set aside, which would then go back to the CTB to approve the overall list across the Commonwealth. Now, we did have some updates for this round. Wanted to go through these. So, first of all, agreements must be signed and returned to the locality within 6 months of receipt. All TA funds available for C2TB allocation are distributed equally. The 8 pre-apps and 5 full apps per applicant per cycle. And this one here, important, and this kind of affected our allocation process, at least at our TPS meeting last month. Projects have to receive 100% of the request. In other words, if project A requested $1.5 million, it's either going to be 1.5 million or zero. There will be no more partially funded projects. So let's just keep that in mind for when we get to the chart that TPS recommended. Lifetime cap was also put in place. 2.5 million is all you can get from TA set aside from any individual project, which is a huge increase from previously. And this another point to really pay attention to is any surplus funds from the process will be going to a statewide account. If it's from the CTB allocation pot, it'll go into a statewide pot. There's going to be a 2 million seed fund to start that, and that's for all across the Commonwealth for any cost increases in the future. So this is so easy to read, right? Everybody can see that? No, I can't either. But I do want to go through it. It is in your agenda. This chart is in your agenda. It's slightly different. I had to make a couple of edits to it, but it's slightly different. I'm going to do my best to kind of go through and highlight some of these things. And once again, this is, there we go. That does blow it up just a little bit. All right, so you see this number up here, 4.1 million. That's how much money the CTB member had to allocate to projects. And if you go down the bottom here, this is the total amount that the HRTPO has to allocate, 13.6 million. And the CTB member went through and Mr. Stamp provided his allocations. And then we brought those numbers to the TPS meeting we had on February 23rd here, and wanted to highlight a couple things here. First of all, the idea when TPS met was to go through the district priority rankings pretty much in order. The first section up top here, these are all existing projects that needed additional monies. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these first 5 here are all existing projects and requesting more money. Now, what the CTB member did here was he went through the projects that are previously existing and applied essentially about 1/2 of the cost increase for that project. Now, that doesn't match, as you can see here, the total request. So you see there's a total request is 1.5 million. The cost increase for this first project, the first particular project from Newport News, was slightly higher than what that 1/2 the cost increase was. So TPS came back in and they applied any existing or any additional money that was needed to bring that balance to a zero. And that was what occurred on these first 4 projects. But just wanted to reiterate that the CTB member did not put any money on this last project here in this first section. Number 5, the boat trail from Newport News Park to Yorktown Road. Yes. No, he didn't put any money in the third one, but the TPS funded that request in full, the 1.7 million. Okay. So of the projects at the top here, there's only one that had a remaining balance that wasn't funded. And you notice that in this chart here, in the it's highlighted in red, these projects. These projects also had funding requests under the CRP, the Carbon Reduction Program, which we're not getting into today, but they were funded in that other chart, and it's in your agenda if you wanted to take a look at that, the chart for the CRP program. But before I really get into the next part of the chart in any more level of detail, just wanted to just kind of in the sake of transparency, I wanted to give Newport News an opportunity to kind of discuss their projects that appear on this upper section, the existing projects. And I think that VDOT had a comment as well. So if you don't mind, Madam Chair, I just kind of wanted to hand off to them just to kind of make a couple statements about their projects.
So for the Washington Avenue project, we've got this is our, I think, third phase of reconstructing Washington Avenue. Mostly it's lighting, sidewalk, ADA accessibility, a lot of pieces like that. We got into the preliminary stages, discovered some additional work beyond the original scope within the same footprint, and that's what drove the cost increase. The others are two we had for a small cost increase that covered mostly inflationary costs between what the market was when we first applied and our current estimates. And then we've applied for the additional funding for 2 bike trails for reduction in local funds in order to accelerate the projects. Pulling the 1 bike trail out for CRP, we have allowed that to go to 0. Lower tap request, which allowed more money to hit down the page of the project. We understand that there's potential with the CTB member if they modify their allocations would then cause a funding issue with those 2 projects that are the existing projects receive funding. And at this time, we're not sure exactly what the outcome of that will be.
And I might add one more twist to the whole story here is that the CTB allocations, there are 2, as you notice, one of the numbers kind of hanging out there, put 93,000 on the project number 5 here on the boat, but then there was no corresponding TPO allocation because it was funded through CRP. So that money's hanging out there. That money would go back into that statewide pot I talked about earlier. So it would go out from our area and be up for grabs elsewhere. And the same thing applies if you go down the chart. Oh, did not want to do that. If you go down the chart here on this Chesapeake project, Gum Road multi-use path, allocated 213,000 on that. And as I mentioned earlier, if you don't have the full funding on a project, then it has no funding. So that 213,000 has to go somewhere else. So that would also go back into that statewide pot if our CTB member doesn't adjust that. And one other thing I wanted to mention on this chart here is that the bottom here, these are non-HRTPO projects. And once again, these are also Emporia and Accomack, Northampton. This is in the Hampton Roads Construction District still. So our CTB member does have allocation authority to put money on those projects as well. And as you can see here, he decided to put $500,000 on the pedestrian accommodations on US 58 and also $500,000 on the Eastern Shore Rail Trail in Parksley. So there's $1 million of the 4.1 million there, and then it would be up to the at-large member and the secretary to complete any funding on those projects. The same as we have here for the Chesapeake project, and potentially in the first section here as well. At that point, before I get into the new projects, I wanted to see Mr. Howell, see if you had any comments on where we stand on this at this point.
Sure, yeah, just a couple things. As Brian mentioned, we're working with the CTB member now to see if he's gonna, if he wants to adjust his numbers, specifically for the two projects that did not receive TPS funding, he has the opportunity to either, there's 4 different options that he could apply money to. Other new projects, if he could fully fund them, the TPS could have put additional money if needed to fully fund, or he could let it go back into the statewide pot. Or as John mentioned, he could put them on the 2 projects that are outside of the TPO area. I did want to point out real quick on the 2 projects outside the TPO area. For the federal code, for TAP program, we have to apply a certain amount of dollars based on population. So one of the populations area is under 5,000. So there's a certain dollar amount statewide that has to be put on those type of applications. There's another percentage for 5,000 to, I think it's 5 to 10 or 5 to 20, and then so on. So that's what our at-large members will look at in April to make sure we're meeting the code requirement to allocate certain funds. So Mr. Stan did put some money on there to help get those projects move forward to meet the statewide intent of the federal law. As far as the existing projects on the Newport News side, I did want to mention that we're working with Newport News and our CTB member. There may be a possibility that the CTB member might pull some of his money off of those projects. The main reason, the CTB member was comfortable funding the delta between the previous round application to what they're currently asking to help cover the cost increase. He did have some concerns with the locality reducing their local share from the previous round to this round, specifically because he looks at this chart, he looks at the scoring, the priority ranking, but he also looks at local contributions above the 20% when he makes his determination on what money he wants to put or which projects he wants to put his money on. So that was the only reason. He still has some concerns with reducing the local share on those projects. So we're still working with him on that and working with Newport News. So there could be some changes between now and the TPO. We're not sure at this point. We're still working with the CTP on that.
All right, thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. Just keeping all that in mind, then the next step was, when the TPS met, was to take a look at new projects finally. So if you take a look at the new projects, went through, and the idea was really to go through the priority order, the district ranking, to allocate funds to other projects. So just going right down through here, we had the top new project as far as ranking was the Suffolk Seaboard Coastline Trail, segment 3C. That received full funding. Next item in York County, Birthplace of America Trail, section 1, also fully funded. In James City County, we had a pair of sidewalk improvement projects. Those both received full funding as well. And then the next item was in York County, another pedestrian connector received full funding as well, the 1.5 million. And then here's the allocation from our CTB member on the next project up in the ranking. Yet that wasn't enough to fully fund it. And then also Chesapeake at the TPS meeting mentioned that their number 1 priority for the multitude of projects that they had listed was over here, the 515,000 for the Great Bridge Boulevard sidewalk. So that was fully funded under this process as well. So hopefully I've made that clear as mud for everybody. If you have any questions on this item, please feel free, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions for you. But I just wanted to be transparent as possible, since we won't be able to take an action on this. There's a lot here, and I just wanted to make sure you guys are aware of the situation before this does go to the HRTPO board. And one last item, here's the reserve. We do have $327,343 in our reserve to work with. Still 4 projects in the TPO area. That could potentially be combined with some of these ideas to go through some of the residual monies that Mr. Stan has allocated. And there may be an additional project or 2 funded between now and the board meeting. Just wanted to let you be aware of that as well. So any questions or comments, I'd be happy to try to answer those for you.
I do have one question. Should the CTV member decide to change some of his allocations, it wouldn't come back to us, right? It would be
No.
handled.
No, that's correct. It wouldn't come back to this board. The only caveat to that would be is if he pulled off his funding off of one of the existing projects that shows funding currently, then that money would have to be made up by the TPS because it has to be fully funded to the request. That makes sense.
Anybody else have any questions? Just so thankful for the TPS subcommittee. They worked hard and made it work out, and we were able to fund, it looked like the top 10 plus one extra. So excited for those projects. Able to move forward.
And on the CRP program, we were able to fund every project that wasn't funded in TA set aside. You can see in your agenda, but I will bring that item back to the April TTAC meeting. And just a side note, as far as quorum and what we aren't able to accomplish today, we do have, if you look in the, when we get to the 3-month calendar, we will be bringing an item to this group in April on TTAC quorum update and bylaw update. So hopefully we won't be in this situation in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Okay, so hopping all around, Dale, item number 12 was going to be an action, but since we still do not have a quorum, we're not going to take any action on that. She's just going to present a little bit on number 12, 2050 Long Range Transportation Plan status update. And also there is a silver Scion with their lights on. So if that's you. Check out your copy.
All right, good morning, everyone. Just for the sake of time, we've got, loaded TTAC meetings for the next few months. I'm going to go ahead and present on our scenario planning framework for our 2050 LRTP. Not taking action today, but we need TTAC's action before I go to the board. So this will delay us slightly. When I bring it back, I won't re-present to you guys. I will spare you that, but we'll still take an action in the future. So I wanted to start off with this quote because this really resonated, with me and my team, that this present moment used to be the unimaginable future for people in the past. And as we're trying to plan 20 and 30 years into the future, we have the fun and challenging task of trying to imagine that unimaginable future. Oops. So the way we do that in the long range transportation plan is with scenario planning. And if you think about like the circle of knowledge, we know very little with all the possibilities that can happen in the next 20 to 30 years. And we also know that we don't know a lot about the future, but most of our circle of knowledge, we don't even know that we don't know it. It hasn't even been imagined or created yet. So again, that makes it really challenging when you're trying to look out so long into the future. But we still have to do it. So when we start thinking about the year 2050, there are so many what ifs. I'm not going to capture them all, but you think about in our region, what's the port gonna, how's it gonna grow in the next, 20 years? What about the military? Is it gonna change in terms of its, size, maybe automation? The transatlantic data cables and the data centers that might pop up and our fiber ring and businesses that want to locate next to the fiber ring, working from home. How does that change things? Sea level rise, right? Like, what do we do with storm surge and recurrent flooding? All these things, they're saying are just predicted to get more severe looking out into the future. And then, with technology, there's so much, right? We already are experiencing some stuff with connected and autonomous vehicles. We've got our artificial intelligence. How is that going to change the way that we live and travel? Deliveries, is it going to be by drones? Or we're going to have driverless deliveries? Maybe driverless buses taking us around, more, microtransit, air taxis, maybe we're the Jetsons by 2050. So all these things we have to sort of think about when we're looking ahead. So again, the way we're doing it is we're incorporating scenario planning. Specifically, we're incorporating exploratory scenario planning because there's different schools of thought with scenario planning. And what we're doing is asking what could happen, and we're shifting from trying to predict what's going to happen, and instead we're trying to prepare for that uncertainty. And so another way to look at that is we're not trying to hit the bullseye of a dartboard. We're trying to cover the dartboard with a range of future possibilities. And the way we do that is we create multiple plausible futures. We are not picking a preferred scenario. That is a misconception. We're not trying to manifest one of our scenarios. And the reason we do this is to stress test our transportation system so that we can identify the most robust and resilient projects to include in the LRTP. So this graphic sort of high level shows, we're going to have our traditional baseline and 3 alternative greater growth scenarios that I'll go into a little more in depth. And, when we say we're going to evaluate and rank projects across all of our scenarios, essentially when we have candidate projects, the ones that do best in each of these 4 scenarios are the ones that we're going to deem the most robust and resilient. I won't read all of this, but we do have objectives and major considerations. And it's essentially we've got to, with regional collaboration, identify those drivers. We have 4 scenarios. Like I've already said, candidate projects are going to be evaluated through these scenarios. And we want to make sure this project is objective and data driven, and we're leveraging the tools that we have as a region. So in terms of input, the LRTP subcommittee has been very integral in developing our scenario planning framework, and we've also received input directly from the public. This LRTP subcommittee, every step of the way in terms of identifying drivers, scenario concepts, what should we be carrying over from our previous 2045 LRTP so we're not recreating the wheel, really getting into the weeds about, well what are some attractive growth storylines or suitability factors, and how attractive would those or should those be, providing data. And from the public, we've had a couple of surveys, and there's also a current public review opportunity on our draft regional scenario planning framework. So in terms of how we refined our scenarios, we did carry over a lot of assumptions from our 2045 LRTP because that was a very robust project. And as I just said, we didn't need to reinvent the wheel. So we have our traditional 2050 baseline. This one is based off locality comprehensive plans, and it's how we've traditionally developed a long-range transportation plan. And then 2 of our greater growth scenarios, these are the ones we carried over from our 2045, looks at, well, what if growth is focused more in urban areas versus what if growth is focused in suburban areas and has more regional sprawl. And then we changed the 4th scenario. Previously, we looked at greater growth on the water. For 2050, we're looking at greater inland growth or greater like a westward shift because historically, as we've been doing our forecasts, we see that the population shift is going inland and west with our last 3 long-range transportation plan forecasts. So this is just a summary of the public surveys we've had. We asked the public about what are some drivers of change that you think might impact the way the region grows or maybe the way we travel. What are some travel preferences? And we also asked some regional priorities, what's important to communities, community members, and then technical stakeholders. We also asked questions about lessons learned. How can we do our long-range transportation planning process better? All that was fed into this framework. This is a part of your agenda packet, but essentially our framework is 3 main criteria. We have regional place types, scenario narratives, and a greater growth control total. And I will go into a little more depth with each of these. In terms of developing the regional place types, this is based off locality land use. So we've collected locality land use and assigned a regional code. It is not regional land use planning. And the reason we do this is to synthesize both existing and future land use so that we have a common language when we're looking at land uses across the region. An example is, we've said, okay, when we say it's residential, making sure that the residential in Franklin is similar in terms of definitions as the residential in James City County or Virginia Beach. And then we've broken up each of our major land use codes into minor codes. Example for residential is we would have low density, medium density, high density, and rural. This is updated with every LRTP cycle, and our subcommittee updated and approved our land use for the 2050 back in July of last year. So our regional place types are built off this locality land use data, specifically those minor land use codes. They are consistent place types for both existing and future scenarios. We do have extra future place types if we need to, if localities are developing in a way that we don't see today. So that does give us some flexibility. We have reconciled these place types with our transportation analysis zone data, population and employment. And essentially what this gives us is standardized densities of population and employment for each land use type. And this is what we use to determine capacity and suitability for future growth. Now shifting to the actual scenarios, scenario narratives, which are our storylines. Again, we worked with our LRTP subcommittee to identify plausible scenario narratives. And I've put up here some of the overall process, right? Identifying those drivers, what are some economic growth storylines, trying to organize those into spatial themes, and then refining them into these greater growth scenario narratives. And some of our considerations, because we are doing exploratory scenario planning, is that we have to make sure that these drivers are highly impactful, and they're also highly uncertain factors that we want to test. We want to make sure that we're exploring the bounds of possible outcomes, and that our scenario narratives are reinforcing rather than canceling each other out when we're testing candidate projects. Again, this is part of your agenda package. I won't read any of the bullets, but essentially we organized our scenario drivers into 4 main groups: economic drivers, community drivers, technology, and environmental. And then in terms of our spatial themes, this is, sort of that overarching storyline for each of our greater growth scenarios. So in the urban growth scenario, what happens if we focus more growth in our urban dense areas? And then in terms of affordable housing, maybe more missing middle. And again, this is part of your agenda package. You can read each of these. For suburban growth, we're saying, okay, what if growth happens more dispersed? And there's different assumptions for technology. It would be more connected or autonomous cars than connected cars. In the greater inland, this is this shift inland because of resiliency. If there's more inundated areas, what does that do to future growth? And then finally, the scenario narratives themselves. And this spells out each of our different assumptions in terms of, port, modal preference, and those overarching economic storylines. The biggest takeaway from this slide is what each of these will help us test. So the urban scenario is helping us test more multimodal travel patterns. The suburban scenario is helping us test more overall regional travel. And then that inland scenario is helping us test that resilience effect on travel behavior if more people are shifting inland. And we're also exploring more deeply remote work and what that does to alternate commuting patterns. So that the last piece of our framework is that greater growth range. This is greater growth above what our official forecast is for 2050. Again, this is intended to stress test our transportation system so that we can identify those most resilient projects. We have to pick the range that is plausible. Too little, we don't have enough to actually to be able to evaluate benefits. Too much, and we're masking those differences. So looking at different forecasts for the region and the state, that Goldilocks range seems to be between 24 and 33%. We're working with consultants right now to refine that to an actual number. It looks like it's going to be 24%, but it will be within that range. So again, this is our scenario planning framework, and everything that I've just explained to you, I've put in bullets on here. So you can read that at your leisure. We will be asking the April TTAC for a recommendation for the board to approve this framework. It is essential for the 2050 long-range transportation plan that we do get this decision point in place before we start analyzing candidate projects. So won't do that today. Any questions from anyone? I should be mean and call on people, but I won't. Feel free to reach out to us if anyone has any questions. We appreciate the involvement of the LRTP subcommittee. They sat through many meetings and many details. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so we're also going to have a discussion or a presentation on item number 14. We will not be taking action on it. So this is HRTPO Transportation Improvement Program Revision Procedures Update. Kathleen.
Good morning, everyone. I am here to highlight the upcoming proposed changes to the TPO TIP amendment and administrative modification procedures. As with the TA set-asides, this is time sensitive, and so this will be going straight to the board on March 21st. These, what is on the screen right now is the actual proposed revisions to the TIP. And the reason why we looked into changing these procedures is because Hampton Roads, as we all know, is an orphan maintenance area. And we must do conformity because of that. And last year, the board approved streamlined conformity procedures. And with these streamlined procedures, it was brought to our attention that many amendments will have to go through FHWA, even though it's streamlined. So if you have a regionally significant project, and no matter what you are doing to that project, it would then be approved by the board, and then it would have to go to FHWA via a letter that TPO staff would draft and send. However, FHWA has a minimum of 45 days to get back to TPO to approve the conformity finding on each amendment that we send them. So what we did was in February, as John stated at the February TTAC member, we asked for volunteers. We got together a working group, and we came up with these proposed changes. So just to highlight, the amendments will still go to the board for approval. It includes any addition or deletion of a project, an addition or deletion of a project phase, a major change in design scope, concept, or termini, a major change in project phase initiation date of a 6 to 12-month delay. This is a change. We have not had this as an amendment before. Ungrouping of a TIP project to add back into the TIP as an individual project. This mainly pertains to CMAQ and RSTP projects that are grouped in the TIP. However, the TPO requires that if any project has CMAQ or RSTP funding on it, it needs to be included in the TIP as an individual project. We were going to propose that that become an ADMOD, administrative modification, ADMOD. But the ungrouping of a project and adding it back in is dictated at the federal level. So that will remain an amendment. Also, a major change to project cost as determined by the sliding scales below. The first sliding scale is the sliding scale that we have had for many, many years. And it is also dictated at the federal level. So those numbers must remain the same for now. Keith, if you could scroll down. Thank you. We have added this sliding scale, and this is also dictated at the federal level, and this is for transit projects. And then Keith, if you could go to the next page for the ADMODs. So what we are trying to do is keep projects moving forward. And so the changes that we are proposing is minor changes in project and phase costs. That's always been an ad mod if it's a minor change within the sliding scale. This is a change, adding, transferring, swapping, deleting of allocations to a project, including CMAQ and RSTP funds. In the past, those have been amendments. Now we are making them ad mods. And from a TPO staff standpoint, I want to assure you that the review process is the exact same. I still review them. I make sure everything is in line. It will just move forward as an ad mod. If I have any questions, I, consult with VDOT, DRPT, the localities. Adding, removing obligations. That's always been an ad mod, and that stays an ad mod. Splitting or combining individually listed projects with no major change in scope and termini. A minor project schedule change. Ad mods with subsequent schedule project delays will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. And then, as always, a project name description change. Minor changes to the funding sources of previously included projects. That's it in a nutshell. Another reason I wanted to highlight why we are doing it, one, we want to not delay projects, especially the regionally significant projects that would go to FHWA, and they do have a minimum of 45 days that they can get back to us. Also, it is much more staff time for TPO staff, for FHWA staff. So we are trying to simplify the process, but still be transparent. All ad mods will now be included on the board agenda each month that we meet as a standing agenda note. So TPO members can be informed about what is happening to their projects. I will also be emailing ad mods more regularly to locality and agency staff so they can also stay updated. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kathleen. Are there any questions?
Madam Chair, I don't have a question. I did want to thank Kathleen and John and the TPO staff and looking at ways to streamline our process. I know we're all under a lot of pressure to get projects through the project development process as quick as we can. So I think any tweaks or changes we can make to help, speed up that process is certainly warranted and definitely something that we should look at. I also did want to say too that we have a separate effort going on right now working with TPO staff and several district sections along with central office divisions as well, looking at our tip-stip process in whole to see if there's opportunities for us to streamline or cut down on some of the time that it takes to get a project amendment through the tip and the stip and then back to us to be able to move forward. So we're working on that, and we're a little bit behind on that working group, but we'll definitely circle back with this group once we get that further along. But I just wanted to plug that, and again, thank you, Kathleen. I think it was good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so next up is item 15, which is a 3-month tentative schedule in your packet. As John mentioned, in April, we will have the discussion on quorum. And then item 16, for your information, there's the minutes from the TPS meeting and a couple long-range transportation meeting minutes. And announcements, there's a traffics meeting right after this meeting in the 757 room. Anybody have announcements?
No announcement. I just had a question. Knowing that we couldn't vote on the tip amendments, is there an opportunity to bring those to the TPO anyway this month? Because if I'm incorrect, but there's no TPO meeting in April, correct?
There is not.
Is there an opportunity we could bring these directly to the board?
We,
Great. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. Did you?
no, I was
Okay.
going to just say yes.
Okay, meeting adjourned.
10. 1049, we'll call it.